Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Another Search Pilot webinar. My name's Will Critchlow, and hopefully many of you know me by now. A lot of the conversations I've been having recently we've touched on AI, obviously. And this time we have the perfect guest to dive even deeper and more specifically into how AI is changing everything we know about marketing and about search. So Britney Muller, old friend of mine, and now running orangelabs.co, which is a community, a home for marketers who build with AI. And she has gone way down the rabbit hole, I think, of all things AI, and definitely got to this game early before many of us saw the steam train coming. So, Britney, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels great to be here. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start at the beginning. You speak to a lot of people who are themselves getting to grips with what AI is meaning for their job, but also for their business and their clients, maybe depending on what their role is. So, how are you seeing people most effectively explain the changes, particularly to AI search? How are people explaining this well to bosses, co-workers, clients? What are you seeing?
Yeah, this is tricky. I feel like it's one of those things that is best explained by showing them. Showing them through the different platforms, whether it's Google, how these things are showing up, how they're populating different sources from those background queries, and then also showing how, um, you know, random it sort of can feel, right? If you go to ChatGPT and you put in the same prompt several times, you're going to inevitably get very different results. And I feel it's so helpful to really, really demonstrate that and to walk people through the process, so that they can really kind of grasp what's happening under the hood. And you can better kind of set the conversation up to explain the incredible difference from, search engines over here, which is true information retrieval, to LLMs and how they're kind of working together today.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that working together is kind of important. We're going to get more deep into the details, I think. But I think a lot of people have misconceptions about what's going on here. Or you pointed at it there, they think of LLMs as actually information retrieval as well. What are the kind of most common misconceptions that you see?
Oh my gosh, that they rank anything. There's no sort of ranking within an LLM. It's all probabilistic, predicting the next word. Um, that they have some like qualitative assessment of sources, right? They don't, even when they're trained, they don't actually capture or cache what URL the content that they're training on was. So of course, if they've seen specific URLs mentioned a lot in text online, they will have an awareness of that, but they're not indexing or being aware of where this content came from during training. It's all mentions, it's all brand mentions. And I think that's a big disconnect from how we've traditionally thought about, domains and domain authority. It works very, very differently. Yeah. How are you
Yeah, I
how are
think,
you running into this, or what are your thoughts on that?
well, so I think you're pointing at some really interesting stuff, including things that I haven't been thinking about so much. So I I tend to feel I tend to feel more comfortable with the probabilistic stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I think for a couple of reasons. Partly it's like my interests, and I've always like probability and statistics was the area that I was most interested in on the kind of academic stuff. Like
Yeah.
actually, neural networks was stuff that was taught when I was at university, but it was this dead end. Like this is a really cute idea, but it's never going to work. And
Right.
I was studying this stuff in like what '98, and you know I would be a lot more famous and richer if I had been like, no, this is the future, and I'd stuck with the neural network stuff. Because the thing back then is just the computing power didn't exist to do anything more than a toy neural network. So they had back propagation and gradient descent and all this stuff theoretically, but just
Yeah.
couldn't actually run it at scale. And so I've been more comfortable with the fact that it's probabilistic, but I actually haven't for myself done the same query or the same prompt repeatedly, just to actually really viscerally, like you say, see that fact that it's giving you different answers each
Yeah.
time. That's a really, yeah, I'm definitely going to just literally go and do that after this after this conversation. But I've been okay with it gives you a different answer to it gives me, or it gives varying answers over time. I think even in the kind of more pure information retrieval space, we've got okay with personalization. We've got okay with geo differences. We've even seen time-based differences, right? Query deserves freshness, or like queries changing their meaning quite rapidly. And so as a user, those experiences don't feel too wild. But I definitely struggle with that. I really like URLs. Sorry, there's like a geeky, but like URLs are great. I like links. I like clicking on links. This makes me sound like very like some kind of crazy person. But I do think it's probably the biggest limitation of the LLM tools as a just as a tool right now, is that they don't reliably connect the dots between the information they're giving you and places to go out and find the next thing. And I'm sure everybody's had this experience of like it confidently giving you a URL and you click on it, it's a 404, and like it's just hallucinated the URL that maybe this information could have come from, but like didn't, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So that kind of winds me up as a user. I want it to be more closely joined to information retrieval, actually, so
I
that
know.
I can click on the links and get more information. And I hope that's coming, maybe.
Yeah, and they're getting better at that through RAG and connecting it to different real-time search results, because the large language models today, they take about a year to train. And so they're essentially like frozen snapshots in time. And so the only way they're able to kind of amalgamate more accurate, up-to-date answers for you is through retrieving real-time search results for various queries. My biggest headache with this, and how you just kind of took us through that brilliant thought process, is also like, to piggyback on it, it drives me nuts, and I get where this comes from, Will, but I really struggle seeing SEOs stuck in the traditional SEO mental model and trying to squeeze AI and LLMs through that mental model, thinking that they can reverse engineer this in the same way that we could search results, and that there's, ranking factors. We're essentially rediscovering SEO here through that retrieval method. That is not anything that you're doing to, affect change in a core LLM model. It doesn't work like that. And yeah, and there's so many misconceptions around, to your point, like they just confidently deliver the 404 URLs. And if we were to respond to that and enter another follow-up prompt asking, like, why did you do that? Where did this come from? It's going to make up something else, right? It has no interpretability into its own system. LLMs don't inherently know why or how they predicted different outputs over others, or why it generated a 404 for you. And so I think I really want to shed light on this part of the technology, so that SEOs can kind of focus on more maybe like opportunistic, avenues to go down, instead of, again, trying to kind of take this older mental model and apply it to a technology where it's not one-to-one, not even close, right? This is a completely different system.
Yeah. I have so many things. This is like firing all kinds of ideas. So one thing that made me think about was, so you said like reverse engineer like we used to be able to.
Yeah.
I actually think that's overstated. I actually don't think I think it's a long time since we really understood
Yes.
ranking factors or any of this stuff. And that's a drum I've been beating since before AI. Actually, I think it just got too complex, right? It got too high dimensional and too personalized, too different by query, by vertical, by competitors, by all these different kinds of things. And I think there's just been the odd hints when you look back at some of the IR literature from pre-AI era. There was just these odd hints of how much of a trial and discovery process it was, even within Google, for example. There's a great quote. I can't remember which engineer it was from. I think it was in a Hacker News comment or something. And he was like, we just used to try things, right? We'd be like, have you tried taking the square root of this factor or whatever? Like, and he's described early in his career challenging that and be like, no, why would I do that? And his boss was like, well, just to see if it works, to see if it's better. Like, there wasn't a theoretical underpinning that said this will work better if you do all of these things. It was just like, tweak this, tweak that, tweak the other, and see if these things come together.
That's such a good point.
But yeah, and the interpretability thing is another area where I think we simultaneously get thrown off because they act human-like, right? So the Turing test is kind of way in the rearview mirror at this point.
Yeah.
So they seem like people in a certain way, and yet that throws us off because they will confidently tell you why they gave you a 404. It's just not necessarily connected to the truth in any real way. But I did warn you about this, though. This is an area where I think we maybe differ. Is I have no problem using a lot of language around what the models want or think, or you kind of push back on this. I saw a note you wrote about they don't want anything, right? They're just,
no,
as you say, token predictors. I'm not convinced I'm not a stochastic parrot, right? Like,
yeah,
like I don't know. Maybe I'm just really well optimized for predicting my next token. But anyway, I think there is actually a deeper connection there, though, which is I don't think humans are very good at explaining these things. There's quite a lot of psychology research, isn't there, that you ask people why they made a decision, and it's all post-rationalization. It's all like if you actually stop them at different places in the process, they would have made a different decision, or they would have thought differently, or whatever. And actually, the reason they think they chose something is not necessarily the reason they actually did. So I kind of sometimes wonder if there's actually a deeper connection or a deeper similarity that we're maybe realizing.
I think making that comparison really undercuts like our consciousness and our real world intelligence. Like I think it's easy to like make these comparisons, but when you really pull back the veil and look at like the human brain and a neural network from an LLM, we house so many real world experiences. We have real consciousness. We are able to actually reason. I know we throw that word around in the AI community, but these models are not truly reasoning in the way that we as humans do. And so I think it really, I always tell my students, I'm like, the most advanced neural network in the entire world is sitting on your shoulders, like that we know of today is the human brain. It really is. And actually, when you compare an LLM to babies, and I love these talks at NeurIPS, and Melanie Mitchell does a phenomenal job talking and writing about this subject, but comparing the capabilities of like a 1-year-old compared to an LLM, and just how advanced a 1-year-old is in their thought process and their experiments and dropping things and learning about shapes. LLMs are not even close. Until we get a system that thinks more like a child and more like even animals, right? Animals don't have English or, any sort of language that we speak today. They're incredibly intelligent. And so I think we have a very narrow view of intelligence today. We also don't have a shared definition, which is hugely problematic in the AI industry, and where most of the arguments stem from is there's no shared definition on intelligence, AGI, like we get into all these like run around
super intelligence, right?
Yeah, it's like, what are we talking about? So it's very easy for people in power to kind of flex and mold these things to fit their narrative, to fit their hype messaging, to attract investors, to attract customers. And they do sound so human-like. They do sound so confident, but it's so important to remember that these were trained on all of the internet. And fun fact, they were fine-tuned on Reddit's Explain It Like I'm 5 because of the back and forth in the succinct kind of good explaining. Like that literally was the subreddit that took GPT-2 to GPT-3 in a way that it could go back and forth. A real quick, like kind of embarrassing moment for me in the field working at Hugging Face, I was on a kind of this red team at Hugging Face where we were testing Bloom, the largest open source multilingual language model in the world. This was before ChatGPT came out. And I'm working with some of the primary, engineers, and we're just trying to like break it and test it and see how it goes. But at that time, it's just a continuation engine. So you would literally prompt it, and it was all through, we had it connected through Slack. You would literally prompt it. I would write like title, and I would put my like article title, and then I would start my introduction, and then I would let it go, or like start a song or a poem, and you would let it go. And I got really tired one night, and I think there was like 6 of us working on this, like kind of around the clock before launch. And I asked it a question. I asked it something like, who's the best singer in the world, or something just silly. And I got so publicly ridiculed for asking a language model a question by one of the main engineers publicly in our huge company channel in all caps. This is not how language models work. They're not Q&A machines. They're continuation engines. And so I feel like I have all these little scars no one really knows about, which is what...
Did you screenshot that? I feel like
I think I did. I think I did. Because it was like a hero of mine, someone that has like pioneered this space.
Yeah, you should definitely follow up. Be like,
I literally am always like, I wonder what he thinks, like if he remembers it or thinks about it now. I would love to.
Maybe that's still his opinion. He's like, yeah, you should not be typing questions into Gemini. Like, don't do that.
I know, but it's funny to say like who's laughing now, but he's also right. Like he didn't have to handle it like that. It was obviously like mortifying for me professionally, like in that setting. Not great for me. But it was true, and at its core, these are continuation machines. And we have, OpenAI has done a brilliant job with guardrails and system prompts and fine-tuning it with the Explain It Like I'm 5 subreddit so that it is now really, really skilled at amalgamating answers from all of this background training and also real-time search results. So it's crazy how fast this has all come along.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I think it can simultaneously be true that it can't do. None of these things can do things that, like you say, a 1-year-old can do, or a dog can do, or whatever. And yet, there are certain things they can do that are useful right now and accelerating in their usefulness as well. Without getting, there's a lot of discussion about where the is it still accelerating? A certain techniques tailing off. I know there's a lot of discussion of world models and whatever. We're not going to go deep into that one. I think we should focus in on some of the search stuff, because you mentioned a couple of times the way that the RAG, so the retrieval augmented generation, pulls in search results and information at query time or at prompt time, and I think those of us who've been around the SEO space for a long time remember that Google's journey pre-AI has been very much a journey of discovering that users want fresher and fresher and more up-to-date information. So I think it's no surprise that that's a kind of key part of the driver here, even if they didn't take a year to train, right? Even if they were only months or weeks out of date, an awful lot of search queries are about like right now. And they're either about right now in terms of news or novelty, or even just you want the up-to-date answer. So if we're working a lot in e-commerce now, right, for example, so whether it's pricing, stock information, latest offers, never mind product drops and new things. So I think I'm quite bullish on that. And it's one of the reasons, probably one of the big 2 or 3 reasons why I think Google is in actually quite a strong position. I think there's been a lot of concern about their position when OpenAI beat them to the punch with the kind of chat interface. But I think when you look at their vertical integration all the way down to the chip layer, you look at their they're the only cutting edge model attached to a search engine like directly, and they've got all the spam and adversarial capabilities. Like, right. I think they're actually in kind of a strong place. But so let's back up a little bit. can you talk a little bit about this, about grounding and how that works and how you encourage people to think about that?
Yeah, so, oh, well, I used to be so much more fun. I feel like just a wet blanket. But no, this is good. This is good to talk about because grounding, I have a whole post drafted up on this because there's so much misinformation in our space right now as it refers to grounding. So,
Mm-hmm.
grounding in the traditional AI sense quite literally means connecting models to real world sensors, like real world information, temperature, like factual databases, like things that are rooted in the real world. And fun fact, because your statistics background, grounding also originated in statistics and cartology, like map making, where it came from ground truth, where map makers would actually have to go out into the real world and validate that their map like was right or
There
was
actually is a mountain over there.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it's been really bizarre to have this kind of, you know, awareness of, yeah, that's what grounding is in AI and now in the SEO industry. And to no fault of the SEO industry, it has been completely spun into this new thing where we're talking about grounding LLMs in website data. And that is a giant leap, in my opinion. That is,
Mm-hmm.
websites are incredibly biased, inherently problematic for all the ways we're aware of. They're written by people about the real world, right? They're not actually connected or tethered to any like real world information. So it's a change. It's a big change that in the way that we're talking about. And I just say this, and maybe this is again some of my past experiences. Like I worry about SEOs talking about grounding in this way because it's going to erode their credibility with AI researchers. It doesn't make sense to an AI researcher to hear grounding used in this way. And I've actually spoken directly to Microsoft about this because for their AI guide, you know, I was interviewed and I talked about this at length and was saying, you know, this isn't how we should be talking or using the word grounding. And then they ultimately ended up posting like the one caveat that I said about grounding into the guide, and they've added the metric grounding queries to Bing Webmaster Tools. And I really urged them. I was like, that's an even bigger step, right, away from website information because now we're just attaching that name to like AI background queries and really using it as a buzzword. And I just feel like it's at the disservice to the wider industry. And so my heart kind of goes out of when things like this happen and I see especially pioneers in the space. Like I love Microsoft, but you should be delivering better information, in my opinion, to SEOs and to marketers that are confused and trying to figure out how to navigate all of this and spoon feeding them new buzzwords to align to, you know, your messaging and strategy. Like, I don't know. I get frustrated. That's where I get really frustrated because
Well, it's a metaphor for the whole problem, right? You know, I like to say we know some of the people who write the internet, and
yeah,
I we were always taught don't trust everything you read,
yeah,
and I think that problem that you know, I mean, again, it's not new. It's been a problem in the information retrieval space
yeah,
for a long time, and certainly Google went on this journey with the early one box results, right? If you remember back to the pre-AI instant answers, where the problem is that the most prevalent thing written on the internet is not necessarily the most true thing,
right, right.
and especially where it's something that touches on, I don't know, a conspiracy theory or something like that, it's quite likely that the untrue version is the one that people have written about more.
Or yeah,
And so, yeah, it's been a challenge, I think, all along. We've now got it kind of a hundredfold because it's not only there in our own reading, it's there in the reading, in the way the tools are accessing this information as well. And as I was saying, you know, I've been surprised at how little thought there seems to have been in the adversarial thinking of, you know, you mentioned red team before, like there's been a lot of red team work on, are these things going to tell you dangerous information, right? Can you get them to make you a chemical weapon or, you know, whatever?
yeah,
But I've seen much less on the, can you convince them to tell you something that isn't true, or can you publish information that they'll just repeat verbatim, you know,
yeah.
without any sense of truthiness?
Yeah, exactly. We saw an example of this recently. I don't know if you saw it. I forget where it was, but there was an article that came out, and this journalist said, I hacked ChatGPT by talking about how I won like a journalist hot dog eating contest. And then he
I
also
saw the
referenced,
headline. Yeah.
yeah, and then he also references like a police officer hula hooping contest. Like when you, this is SEO like 101, right? When you're able to find a search term that has little to no demand or visibility online, you can rank for it really quickly. And so
Hmm.
you're essentially hacking search results, which is being retrieved through the LLMs, right? The core models in and of themselves don't aren't being trained on any of these outlier situations. So that's been really interesting to like just see people again kind of misconstrue what's actually happening under the hood and perceiving that as hacking the LLM itself when it's really you're just kind of finding those outliers in the spaces to your point, like yeah, how I agree there has not been enough discussion around the misinformation. Like I remember early in AI overviews someone asked like, has a dog ever played in the NBA? And Google's like, of course.
Yeah.
Airbud, like it's everywhere, we've heard about this a
Mm.
lot. And it's like, yeah, what are the efforts taking place? And that's something I wish Google was maybe a little bit more transparent about, because I think it would also breed more confidence to hear that they're working on this, and especially in the different medical, lifestyle, like financial spaces that really can affect people.
Yeah. Um, yeah. What do you hear? Do you know how they are thinking about that kind of stuff? Like, it feels to me that this is an area where Google, of all of the frontier labs, ought to have A, the most experience, B, the most understanding of the importance of it, and C, an advantage because they've been fighting spam in their
Yeah.
index and in their search results for 25 years.
Yeah. They're not very transparent when it comes to this stuff.
Mm.
Myself and many others have asked lots of questions around the AI overviews, AI search. Who's accountable for when things get wrong? How are you going to maintain this ecosystem of, essentially eating up the content of these publishers that depend on traffic, and that's how
Hmm.
you're creating your answers. Like there's a lot of kind of loose ends that I think still need to be figured out with all of this. They quickly jumped into this, and we saw lots of early problems. Right, we still see examples of this. So yeah, I would love to know a little bit more about that, but I don't have any, unfortunately, visibility into how they're doing that.
No. It. I half wonder. I don't expect a lot of transparency out of them in how they're doing it. I
Yeah.
do half expect to see them realize that they're ahead of the others at some point, and
Yeah.
then push it from a PR front of like, look, Google, because there's all the benchmarks, there's all these kinds of things, but I feel like that particular benchmark might be one that hasn't had as much attention as it may get in the coming years.
Yeah, and I also feel like the way that I'm always kind of trying to read between the lines, right? Like at I/O, at announcements, how are they messaging these things? What is their strategy? I, I went to school for PR, and so I have like a little bit of a background in how you
You can
frame
see the
things.
games. Yeah.
Yeah, how you see it. And so they tend to like really, and they've done this for a long time, but like rapid fire announcements during I/O. Like I think there was over 200
Mm.
announcements at last year's keynote, and it was just that was supposed to convey we're doing so much so fast, like here's all this stuff, and it kind of like you know it was so overload for the audience that you just assumed they were kind of on the cutting edge of all of these things.
Mm.
They also the strange thing I can't quite that I grapple with regularly is how they are so quick to talk about the users of AI overviews and of AI mode. It's like, well, you kind of forced it, right? Like this has sort of been forced into our search environment, and to see them try to talk about it in the same way that OpenAI, right, talks about, and it's we've never seen Google in this position before, right? Feeling like they're on their heels a bit, competitively speaking, and trying to catch up and finagle XYZ. And I think we have to be really careful about the messages that we're receiving from some of these giants who, again, are trying to please shareholders. They're trying to please all of these other stakeholders that aren't necessarily direct customers. And so I'm always wondering, like, you know, we're essentially the training data, right? We are in these free, Gemini is on Gmail now. It's like, how is that going to pan out long term for those of us that work with it in this way? And so I don't know. There's a lot of kind of unintended consequences that we don't discuss enough, and also a lot of smoke and mirrors happening at some of these demos, where they're very quick to introduce like the kind of world models or visual model capabilities, and you push it a little bit outside of what the demo was trying to show, and it breaks, right? Like there was a folded up chessboard in one of the demos at IO, and I asked it, like, what's wrong with this chessboard? It was only like half the squares, right? And it said nothing. It's a full chessboard, 8x8 squares, da da da. And I was like, okay, interesting. But you're able to, test it. Another one, you like, how many rings do I have? And it's not good at counting. Like, it's just, again, things that children would be really good at. It struggles. And we've always known this, right? Like AI is really good at solving hard problems. And it's not great at solving easy stuff, real world stuff.
All of these, yeah. It's clear that it's like an alien intelligence in a certain way.
It's an alien intelligence. Have you seen the demo of someone's like, oh, someone gave me this cup, but it's sealed on the top and open on the bottom. I can't drink out of it. And they're like, that's too bad. They're like, that
sucks to be you.
Such a shame. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, or even just in the happens even just in the language space, doesn't it? There was what was the thing recently of somebody asking, shall I drive or walk to the car wash? It's only 100 yards away. Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, you should probably just walk. There's no point taking a car 100 yards. And that's not exactly world model. I don't know what that is, but there's something, there's some kind of deeper seated kind of understanding gap that, like I say, exactly. And yet then other times it's kind of instantly, reading a long complex contract and spotting the typo on page 32 that, literally superhuman capabilities in other ways. So exactly. I find, so that actually segues quite nicely to one of the things I wanted to ask you about is you obviously help folks stay on the cutting edge, use the latest and greatest tools that they should be using. Yeah. What's your best advice? It can feel so overwhelming, right? Like either you're like, I'm just going to stick to the one I know, or you're like constantly chopping and changing and never really, you can spend all your time just trying to set up new tools and not getting anything done. So how are you like helping people through that?
Yeah, and I just want to recognize that's like a completely normal, valid experience right now. Like it is analysis by paralysis. We are inundated and overwhelmed with new AI tools and this and that. But I think it's really important to center how you approach this stuff, not over the tools themselves or the technology, but over problems, real world problems. And so identifying just small, specific tasks that you could help support or automate, whether that is actually using the AI technology or using AI to kind of help you solve it. That's really where I see people gain confidence and momentum, is starting from an actual problem set and trying to build solutions from there, but it's only getting hands-on with some of the tools. I spoke with someone yesterday who, what was he trying to build? I can't remember, but he couldn't do it. And he tried Cloud Code and ChatGPT and was trying to figure out how to connect like these different data sources. That is a huge win. That experience is a huge W in my book. And this is the part where most people get frustrated and stop. That is quite literally like the path to success. It is just paved in failure, failure, failure. And those things are teaching you so much about what works in working with the technology and what doesn't. And so I think again, this is a completely different experience from SEO, where we read about it, we learn about it, we can start experimenting on a small kind of tested scale and site. Working with AI isn't like that. It's extremely iterative, where you are going to face way more failures than success, but that is quite literally how you learn and grow. And it's a large reason why I started Orange Labs, was people tend to get so frustrated they quit. And so in a small kind of safe environment, you go so much further, right? We're able to collaborate with people and help get them past some of these roadblocks. Lots of other people in the space are working with AI, have brilliant ideas, and it's just been so fun connecting those people and helping people kind of see that, you know, even if you have no technical experience today, you are more than qualified, more than capable to be using this technology in really advanced, valuable ways for what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's just about putting that blueprint in place, giving you sort of the runway to experiment, to fail, you know, and supporting you through that process. And most of the time people are genuinely shocked at how easy or how capable they are at spinning different things up through something like Claude Code or you know, Notebook LM. So it's just been fun to kind of help people like find that, because a lot of us, you know, myself included, for the last 10 plus years struggled to find my way through all of this stuff. You know, it was extremely frustrating. You know, and now that we have chatbots and LLMs that we can actually ask some of these questions any time of day, you know, I don't have to go through Stack Overflow and pray that someone answers my question. Like, it's amazing. So I really feel like for those individuals curious or interested in the slightest, you have no excuse anymore. You know, you really have this advanced technology at your fingertips to support you with building and learning. They're incredibly skilled at spinning up different tools. And I love like custom Chrome extensions. A lot of people don't realize you can build your own custom Chrome extensions that do really specific things and just live on your Chrome install and things like that. So I think that's what's really going to help kind of evolve SEOs and marketers in our space, is having an understanding of how, not only how to work with this technology, but how to approach it in a way that actually they can see progress, they can see kind of ROI.
Yeah. It's so difficult, isn't it? Because even when you get enthusiastically into it, it's quite hard to know where the boundary is between this is going to be a slightly frustrating but then magical experience where it completely works at the end of it, and no, this is like beyond the capabilities, or you know, the combination of my capabilities and the model's capabilities right now, and that project is not worth taking on because I'm going to have a very frustrating experience of, you know, me prompting it going, oh, I've nearly got it. No, like, trust me, this next go is definitely going to be the one. So, which is the, you know,
so
equivalent of some of those frustrating bugs in the old school way of doing things. And I think probably the answer is just trying it, curiosity, showing it, like the show and tell type stuff, like you were saying. But yeah, as you like bring it to your teams or your colleagues or other folks around the business, it's just more of that. Yeah, just like showing them what you're doing and asking, being curious about what they're doing.
But it should be a collaborative experience. It should be, hey, I had this idea, here's how I'm going to try to build something. But exactly what you just said, Will, is probably the most common point of frustration for probably, like, honestly, my students or people in the space that are trying to learn about AI, is they start too big. So many people want to build the everything dashboard that does everything for them, that they can just click a button and it tells them what to optimize, how to, and like, yeah, we can get there. In starting this journey and getting momentum in AI, you have to start small. You absolutely, I can't stress that enough. And people, I think when I assign like the project and class of, you have to identify a small and specific task. If the word "and" is in it, it's too much. Like literally silly small. Start really, really silly small, because, and people think that it's limiting them, right? And my argument is, no. You can always add features after you do this first small step. you really have to take on that engineering mindset where you're considering a task that you do regularly that is maybe quite time consuming, and you're breaking it up into individual steps that you could literally write out and hand to a new intern in another room to complete. That's how specific and like small you need to break this up into, and then just solve the first one, right? Just we'll build from there. But I think that's where people really run up against a hard stop with this technology, is they're trying to do too much too quickly, and it you really learn through small steps.
Small successful steps, I guess. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you get to see what really works. Awesome. Final thought, just as we bring. It's fascinating. Thank you for sharing all this stuff. And as I said, there's definitely some things I'm going to go straight away and try. Just bringing it back to search to round things out. From all that you're seeing of the capabilities on the cutting edge and the progress that these different companies are making, whether it's the big established players like Google or the upstarts, what do you think is coming next? Like, break out the crystal ball. What are we going to see coming to organic discovery in the broader sense that is less common or not there yet?
Yeah, I fear that some of the sort of AI mode patent items might come to fruition where they just stop showing the organic results. And it's an answer, and in order for you to see the organic, maybe it's like a small, like, expand or click more.
Yeah.
That is definitely a concern that I see already starting to happen, honestly, and how they're transforming the UI and to look more and more like that chat interface. Um, yeah. And I think an important thing to consider, and how do you kind of combat that? How do you continue to be visible and show up? It really is this brand mention play, right? Being visible in other places on the internet where maybe your audience is already there and can find you that way, but also kind of being included in these other sites that are showing up quite high for these queries. We're seeing some really interesting things take place where AI startup that I know through an advisor really wanted to show up in AI search for these specific queries, and they had just started, so there was no chance they were going to do so. And so they put a very expensive advertisement on one of the top most seen websites that continues to surface, and they started seeing visibility from that, right? They're now kind of included in that data that was pulled in to amalgamate the answer. This is a bit of the shift from traditional SEO will continue to be important because of the way these systems continue to grab those real-time search results. But in this particular case, it was so interesting because they didn't care about a link. They didn't care about a CTA. They literally just cared about that brand mention to be fed back into the LLMs to be surfaced occasionally, right? Which has actually started to happen.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. I also think SEOs and marketers should get ahead of the curve with like the social push, because the one thing that Google and ChatGPT and these AI tools can never replace is real world experiences, real world anecdotes and stories and opinions and hot takes. And so that's why you saw and continue to see Google lean heavily on Reddit with their $60 million a year deal, because it supplements what AI can never, ever, ever touch. They know that. People continue to, crave videos and people and experiences. And so we're seeing a huge push in social continuing to pop up among these AI answers in an effort to give searchers, to give users that option, to give them that visibility into those spaces. So and we know that the systems are also transcribing these videos. So there are some really savvy marketers right now that are going hard on social videos and they strategically put like their target market information at the beginning of the video, right? They know will be transcribed. They know that they want to convey like key information and valuable insights right away because that is transcribed and used in the back end. So thinking about kind of the systems in this kind of new oriented way will be really, really important.
So much to get to grips with, isn't there? And it keeps changing all the time. So maybe we have to do this again. But in the meantime, another shout out, folks should check out orangelabs.co for your community and diving more into all of that side of things. And if people want to hear more, where are you most active on the internet these days?
Most active on LinkedIn for sure. So just Britney Muller over on LinkedIn, and yeah, I try to add some valuable educational pieces when I can.
There's so much in there, yeah. Everything from the grounding, the rag stuff, all these different things that I've been getting from your LinkedIn. So folks should definitely check that out. In the meantime, Britney, thank you. It's been really fun catching up, and good luck with the next cohort of folks that you're taking on this journey.
Thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate it.
See you soon.